Hi, my name is Maddie Wilkinson. I am a Feldenkrais method and a Nathaniel method for children practitioner. I'm going to share my part of a talk that I gave with a colleague named Marielle at Massachusetts General Hospital on Saturday, this past weekend, to a group of parents and providers at the Pediatric Stroke Clinic. Mara's daughter, Mia, had a stroke at around the time of her birth. And we're going to look at some video of Mia and talk about what's evident, what we can see there, and how it relates to learning and recovery from neurological injury. And then I'll have you get on the floor and do some experiential portion as well for yourself to do a movement lesson based on the themes that we cover. So here's the slideshow. So we're going to watch 3 videos of Mia. Mia had a stroke around the time of her birth. This is her at age 5 months. And at this age, the way the stroke was showing up for her in terms of impacting her development was more limited use and control and refined action in her right hand. And you can see also in the uh, flexion of her wrist as well. So, oops, wrong button. Let's go back to that. There we go. So you can see her working with this toy and pulling the paper with her left hand, and her right wrist is more flexed, and she's has a little bit less refinement in terms of grasping. So now I'm going to show 2 other videos and talk about some features of what she's doing and how she's doing it that tend to support learning and recovery from stroke. So these qualities are common to children in early development, and by learning to recognize them and learning to understand them, we can learn how to support the children in our care by utilizing and enhancing these aspects of their own process. And also, we can be inspired and learn from them in order to continue to learn and develop and mature and enhance our brains as well. So here's Mia. So the first thing that I notice or want to bring your attention to is her curiosity, her intrinsic motivation. Mia is driving the pace and direction of her own learning process. She's interested in the what she finds to be fascinating. And at the same time, her use of time, or the spaciousness with which she relates to time, and a process orientation in terms of her really attending to the process of her movement and her sensation. She takes her time to feel and she rests. Here, reducing effort, refining skill. She's going to open her right hand there. And as she does that, she is actually learning to, in that moment, inhibit the extra efforts that would tend to keep her hand closed. And in doing so, she's increasing her efficiency of movement and her sensitivity and her skill. And as she's doing that and differentiating and clarifying the map of her hand and her fingers, and excuse me, um, there she's putting her hands together and she's sensing and touching. This is all, this part of herself is integrated in terms of a functional action of her whole self. Yeah. Here, so here's that first video again. We'll notice mapping. So Mia is having a rich sensory experience. You can see how she's exploring with her hands and her feet, her toes, her feet are bare. They're touching each other in her hands, and she's exploring. And as she's doing that, the visual information of the shadow, her looking at the shadow and looking back at her hand, all and that stream of information along with the tactile information is all enriching and informing and clarifying her body sensations or her map of herself in her brain. Let's notice variation here. Mia explores many rich variations. She's generating a lot of information and doing all kinds of things, right? With her feet, her toes, her ankles, her hands, her arms. And at the same time, so this richness supports her learning and rewiring, and at the same time, her goals are flexible. So she was interested in the pillow initially, and then she kind of rolled to her back and got interested in something else. So her goals are fluid and they change in response to her experience, and she's not sort of fixed on doing one thing over and over again, like I know sometimes we can be. I know I can be myself. So another aspect that comes to light is the wisdom of the developmental sequence, and by that I mean, so we know that children tend to roll over before they can crawl, and crawl before they can walk, etc. And within that, the current developmental stage is laying the foundation for later milestones. So when Mia rolls from her side to her back and then rolls to her side again, she's mapping for herself that process of shifting and coming towards coming to her belly, so that when she does arrive on her belly, she'll know and have a sense of how to go and get back to her back again. And at the same time, or another example is when she's on her belly lifting her head, she's looking at her mom, taking a picture. She's developing the strength and the organization of the muscles along her spine that will prepare her for being upright in gravity. And later, when she goes from kneeling here along this bench to pulling up to stand, and then figuring out how to get back down again, she goes uh, up and down in different ways, a variety, much again, it's like a lot of variation and a lot of rich mapping now, not just mapping in the brain of the body, but actually how you go from being up to being vertical to being down on the ground. And at the same time, um, actually, won't just as she develops that reversibility between those different positions. I'll just go back to this for 1 second. She is going to be prepared and ready for being feeling more confident, more at ease, and more able to experiment and learn in the new situation of standing and walking. So each stage in that way is preparing her as she gains reversibility and mastery, preparing her for the next situation that she'll come to. And at the same time, new sensory motor possibilities emerge in low demand situations. So we saw when she was on her belly and she was working to lift her head against gravity, and her musculature and was engaged in her uh, she's trying to orient and maintain her vestibular systems, trying to figure out how to keep her head upright. All of that activation means that there's less refinement and less nuance and control and sensation to the detail or of the affected part of herself, or in this case her right hand and arm. Whereas when she's on her back and the situation is much lower demand in terms of she's not having to manage her opposing gravity in the same way in terms of her legs are up, but she's able to rest more, and there's a lower level of activation throughout her whole nervous system, and in that way she's got more possibility to sense and her hand and develop more refinement, sensitivity, and control of that part of herself. So, why will we get on the floor? So, there's several reasons. One is we learn through experience. Um, Also, learning to use movement to rewire the brain is fundamentally different from how most of us just naturally or automatically relate to movement and our bodies in a more mechanical way. So, having a concrete personal experience of it is part of the learning process, and it will make you a more skillful observer of children's learning and development, and understanding and sensing those qualities that we talked about and seeing them in action. And by understanding the process, uh, both in terms of these ideas and then having a felt sense, I think it will help you have more ability to both support the child or children in your life or in your work that you care about, and also, or perhaps, if you're not coming to it for that reason, have more of a sense of how to apply these things to your own learning and your own process of refining your own action, your own sense of pleasure and engagement. So, a couple of things to keep in mind on how to approach the movement lesson. First thing is slow down. We tend to go fast as adults, and learning takes time, and sensing something new takes more time. So, actually, slowing down is very important for developing new awareness and new mapping and making new connections. Reduce your effort. We saw that and talked about that in the video. Learning to a large degree in the early development and for us going forward is about reducing the unnecessary and contradictory and unintentional, possibly unintentional, but the work that actually interferes with what we're trying to do. And as you progress and you're able to reduce those efforts, you're able to refine the quality of your action. So it just means do less. It's another way to say that. Pause and rest. So Mia was, and children in general, they they pause and they rest. And if you think about it, if you do something repetitively, like over and over and over again, very quickly you stop paying attention to what you're doing because your brain tunes it out. And that's appropriate because it's now no longer relevant in terms of the information. So we're coming from an information model, so I want you to actually pause between each movement and rest when you feel that either your attention is wandering, or if you feel fatigue, or even just to rest, to sense and integrate and notice the changes. Sense yourself and be curious. An attitude of curiosity, we saw that in the video. Certainly it's it's so potent in terms of coming to in this case a familiar situation. You are, however old you are, you've been in your body for so many years. um, if you can bring curiosity to the process of what you're doing and what you're noticing, you can discover something new, and that's really what we're after here. Okay, so go ahead and find a spot for yourself to be comfortable on the floor, and you can listen to the movement lesson.